Hi, my name is Sam. If you watch this for the next 12 minutes or so, you may be shocked, angered, or maybe saddened. My hope is you will be moved to join me in remembering thousands of American service members and saying what happened to them is not okay. Growing up, most of what I knew about the Vietnam War came from the evening news. In the past few years, I have become interested in a particular part of the wars our nation fought in from World War II through today. I'm thinking of the American service members captured by enemy forces but not released when the wars ended. This is a subject I never knew about. I know about it now, and I have the freedom to talk about it. So here we go. The Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA, is the government agency responsible for explaining what happened to U.S. service personnel who did not return home from combat. Their mission is to provide the fullest possible accounting for America's missing military members to their families and the nation. Officially, more than 81,000 American servicemen and women from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Cold War, Iraq, and other conflicts are missing. I went to the DPAA website and added the totals of unaccounted for men and women from my home state of Indiana. There were 1,737 service members from those wars unaccounted for. These men or women did not return from war for a variety of reasons. For example, they may have been killed in action, but their body was not recovered. They may be a prisoner of war, POW, or their circumstances may be unknown, in which case they would be presumed to be missing in action, MIA. MIA service members with no updates to their records within a given time period, for example a year, are presumed to be dead. They receive a presumptive finding of death designation, which ends all government attempts to rescue them. Sometimes, though, the dead really aren't dead. For example, John T. Downey was a CIA operative who disappeared while on assignment in Manchuria on November the 30th, 1952. No one in the free world knew he was captured alive by the Chinese communists. His family was notified 1 year later on December the 4th, 1953, that he was officially presumed dead. A year after that, on November the 28th, 1954, China unexpectedly announced to the world that Downey was alive and sentenced to life in prison. President Nixon visited China in 1972 and worked to get Downey released. He was released March the 11th, 1973, after more than 20 years in prison, as a sign of goodwill by the Chinese. They could have easily held Downey captive secretly for much longer. The same could be said of who knows how many of the 81,000+ Americans reported by the DPAA to be unaccounted for. It remains to be seen how many of them died in enemy prison systems or are possibly still alive. Official government records and eyewitness testimony make a strong case that thousands of American service personnel were captured by enemy forces but not released when the wars ended. A number of books have been written purporting to tell what happened to them. I read the following 9 books about American soldiers from World War II through the Vietnam conflict. They all tell the same story of American soldiers captured by enemy forces and abandoned by their government. Those books are Perfidy by John Top Holland and Father Patrick Basquio, Abandoned in Place by Lynn M. O'Shea, An Enormous Crime by former U.S. Representative Bill Hendon, Republican from North Carolina, and Elizabeth A. Stewart. American Trophies by Mark Souter and John Zimmerly. Last Seen Alive by Lawrence Jollidan. Betrayed by Joseph D. Douglas, Jr. Soldiers of Misfortune by James D. Sanders, Mark A. Souter, and R. Court Kirkwood. Kiss the Boys Goodbye by Monica Jensen Stevenson and William Stevenson. Codename Bright Light by George J. Vaith. These books claim American servicemen were captured or about to be captured by enemy forces when last seen, and they never came home. They just disappeared, poof, but they left a trail. The authors of the books listed above compile convincing evidence to show American military service members were sent to Communist China and the Soviet Union for slave labor, intelligence, espionage, and hostage exchange purposes. They were sent to China, Laos, North Vietnam, and the Soviet Union to be bargaining chips in various negotiations, slave labor, intelligence purposes, and technical assistance. They were used in medical experiments in North Vietnam and the Soviet Union. Was their sacrifice in vain? Congress authorized 2 ways to remember and honor these American POW MIAs. One is the National POW MIA Recognition Day, observed annually the 3rd Friday in September. The other is the POW MIA flag. Hopefully, we appreciate the intent behind these 2 national recognitions. Unfortunately, these men and women and their families have been forgotten by too many members of what is sometimes called a grateful nation. They deserve better. These warriors and their families have not received from their government the fullest possible accounting. It is important to give it to them for 2 reasons. First, we as a nation have a moral obligation to respect the sacrifice made by these Americans. That moral obligation should compel us to find all living POWs, MIAs, or their bodies and bring them home. If that is not possible, the families must receive a truthful explanation of why not. It may sound like I'm stating the obvious when I say truthful. I'm really stating what we take for granted. People die in battle. It's sad, but it's not unexpected. We assume our government will tell us the truth about something as important as whether or not a family member is alive. That is not necessarily the case, and I say that because of what I've read in the books listed earlier. For example, Joseph D. Douglas Jr. in his book Betrayed tells the following story. Roger Dumas was captured by the Chinese in November 1950. His brother Robert worked the past 50 years as of 2002 trying to find his brother and bring him home. He asked his U.S. Senator for help. The Senator in turn asked the Pentagon for help. Their answer was there was no evidence his brother Roger was ever captured and held prisoner in the Korean War. That was 18 years after a court ordered the Pentagon to acknowledge Roger had been captured. The court reached their decision after hearing from 2 former POWs who testified Roger Dumas was taken prisoner with them, and they saw him in prison as they were in the process of being repatriated. 2 additional POWs identified Roger as captured. A 5th former POW, Walter Inbaum, testified he was captured in 1956 and taken to a North Korean jail where he saw Roger Dumas and 34 other Americans more than 2 years after the Korean War officially ended. During 1982 court proceedings, the U.S. government asked that Inbaum not be called to testify, and their request was granted. The following year, 1983, Mr. Inbaum refused to talk again with Robert Dumas because he said an officer from the Pentagon threatened to have him fired from his government job if he did not forget he saw Roger Dumas and the other Americans in North Korea. The Roger Dumas story exemplifies the second reason our government owes the families of POW MIAs a full accounting. The 9 books listed earlier make a compelling case that our government has information explaining what happened to thousands of American servicemen dating back to 1945. I learned our government in many instances knew American servicemen and women were captured and in some instances knew where they were, but they did not exhaust all possible means of rescue. Furthermore, they withheld information from or lied to the American people for decades about the POW MIAs and, more importantly, family members desperate to know what happened to their loved ones. I should note many military and civilian officials made their best efforts over the years to rescue our men and women in uniform, but they were overruled by others in the upper levels of command. Other warriors were betrayed, sacrificed for unknown reasons. The betrayers perhaps believed their actions were justified. Such a belief would arguably be misguided at best. I say those betrayals were as morally reprehensible as the crimes of any despot in history, and the responsible officials should be held accountable. It is much easier to get the public support needed to hold our government accountable if we have the full accounting and the victims are remembered as real people, not just a name from long ago. With a little effort, we can do more, and I'm asking you to help me do that. As stated earlier, the DPAA says more than 81,000 American servicemen and women remain unaccounted for from World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam conflict, the Cold War, Afghanistan, and other conflicts. 9.5 days are required to read all those names at the rate of 6 per minute. That's unrealistic. So let's break the total down and honor the men by state. This is my vision. The names of the 225 as of September 19, 2019, POW/MAAs from Indiana who served in Korea and Southeast Asia will be read publicly with the appropriate dignity. The following year, we can expand to include the 1,512 men and women from World War II. Bagpipes will begin and end the event. Volunteers read each name, home of record, date of loss, etc., with a backdrop of the popular music and the major events from the year the service personnel disappeared. Family members or friends can participate if they like. Those details give listeners a sense of the time and culture these people came from. Pictures, if available, will help viewers relate personally. 4 hours are needed to conduct this event if 3 names are read per minute and enough of the background information is included to be effective. I want a quality recording of the event to post on social media so people in other states can evaluate this idea for their use. To get that, someone with access to video equipment and knowledge of how to effectively use it is needed. Other needs include sound equipment to play the period music, service flags from the Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy with base and poles, plus another base and pole for the POW/MIA flag. Volunteers to read the names publicly and assist with whatever other unexpected things may arise. Please email shinnyup88@gmail.com. That's SHINNYUP88@gmail.com with responses if you want to help make this happen. And I thank you in advance.